Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are bringing you a brand new explainer that dives really deep into a profound source text. We're looking at a recent sermon by Pastor Elvis that explores the absolute foundation of what it means to be part of the Church of the Living God. We're going to break down the key attributes of a God who isn't just some abstract historical concept, but rather an active, breathing, and deeply involved presence in our lives. So let's get right into it and see exactly how Pastor Elvis breaks this whole thing down.
To really grasp the idea of a living God, our source material makes a fascinating distinction right out of the gate, and it's this. Just because something lasts forever doesn't actually mean it's alive. Think about dirt, or a giant rock, or water. They're practically eternal, right? Their forms might change over time, but they don't just disappear. However, they are fundamentally dead. They can't produce life on their own, they don't have emotions, and they certainly don't react to you. But in stark contrast, an eternal and living God doesn't just endlessly exist. He actively breathes. He feels joy and sorrow. He hears our words the very second we speak them, and he makes judgments. He's a highly dynamic, moving force.
And that brings us to a foundational scriptural moment highlighted in our source text. It's from Matthew 16:16. When Jesus asked his disciples who they thought he actually was, Peter didn't just give a generic answer like, "You are the Son of God." No, he specifically said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." The pastor emphasizes here that Peter, a Jewish man steeped in tradition, very intentionally chose to highlight that word living. He recognized that the God they serve wasn't some dead idol made of wood or stone that just gathers dust in a temple, but a fiercely active, present entity whose breath is still flowing today. Okay, let's dive into this. Based on the pastor's analysis, we're exploring 5 distinct attributes of this living God. We've got 1, the identity of the living God, 2, amazing unity in the church, 3, the head and true provider, 4, the power to give life, and finally 5, justice and separation. Starting with Section 1, the identity of the living God. So the core argument here is that you can truly identify that God is alive, not just by staring up at the sky, but by looking down at the very people he governs. His life is tangibly reflected in how he organizes and manages his chosen people. And to illustrate this, the source uses a brilliant analogy, comparing the church to a parliament. Think about a regular political parliament for a second. It's loud, it's chaotic, it's filled with incredibly diverse people constantly arguing over entirely different viewpoints. But the church, as it's defined here, is a gathering of similarly diverse individuals who are miraculously kept in total peaceful order. It's not some clever human management keeping this spiritual parliament from completely devolving into chaos. It is literally the active intervening grace of a living God maintaining that peace. Moving on to Section 2, amazing unity in the church. Because a living God is actively at work, he manages to orchestrate something that's practically impossible by human standards. Historically and culturally speaking, Jews and Greeks, the highly educated elite and the completely uneducated, masters and their servants, these are people who would absolutely never sit at the same table together. The source text emphasizes that a dead idol or a catchy philosophical idea cannot dissolve those deeply ingrained worldly divisions. It literally requires a living God to step in, completely change their hearts, and unite radically different social and cultural groups into one harmonious body where nobody claims to be greater than anyone else. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the sermon breaks this unity down into functional organization. A living God doesn't just toss a bunch of random people into a room and hope for the best, right? He intentionally organizes them. Drawing heavily from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the pastor compares the church to a human body. God systematically assigns very specific roles to specific people. Some folks act as the hands to serve, some act as the feet to move, others as the mouth to speak and translate. The mere fact that everyone accepts their assigned role without breaking out into jealousy or chaos is presented as absolute, undeniable proof that an active living organizer is at work in their hearts. Which leads us to Section 3, the head and true provider. Within this highly organized body, we get to explore how Christ functions as the ultimate head and true provider. The source references the book of Ephesians to describe Christ as the Shiromini, or the supreme head of the church. And the analogies here is really beautiful. It's like a husband caring for his own body. Nobody hates their own body, right? You nourish it, you protect it. In the exact same way, the text argues that the church has survived and thrived for over 2,000 years for one reason only. A living head has been continuously providing for it. From supplying the most basic spiritual milk to profound, life-changing wisdom, Christ lovingly sustains this massive, diverse body across thousands of years. Next up is Section 4, the power to give life. The sermon takes a moment to remind us that when God spoke to Moses, he boldly declared himself the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The crucial takeaway from that? He is the God of the living, not the dead. The process of how this living God actually gives life is broken down into 3 super powerful steps. First, he rescues us from spiritual death. The pastor uses a really great analogy of a dying patient. You don't take a dead body to the emergency room, right? You rush a dying person there because there's still a chance for rescue. Second, he grants a completely new spiritual birth. And third, he doesn't just patch us up and leave us in the waiting room, he sustains us within his own eternal spiritual family. He actively keeps his people spiritually alive day in and day out. But we have to pause here, because this explainer wouldn't be complete without addressing the heavier side of this reality. Take a look at this quote from Hebrews 10:31. It says, "It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God." The tone of the source material shifts pretty dramatically right here. Because God is alive, he isn't just a warm, loving provider, he is incredibly observant. He's reactive, and he is perfectly just. Look, you can kick a dead rock and absolutely nothing happens, but you cannot mock or defy a living God without a consequence. It is a frightening, urgent reality that this God is constantly watching everything we do. And that brings us to Section 5, Justice and Separation. A living God doesn't just sit idly by. He actively judges the world, he disciplines his followers, and he demands a very clear separation between what is holy and what is unholy. And this brilliantly illustrates that point. The pastor dives into a powerful analogy from the book of Exodus, contrasting the land of Goshen with the land of Egypt. Think about it. While Egypt was being completely devastated by plagues, giant hail, and widespread destruction, the Israelites living right next door in Goshen were experiencing absolute, unbroken peace. The living God intentionally drew a hard line of divine protection. He explicitly separated his people from the judgment that was heavily falling on the rest of the world. And the level of detail in this separation, it's honestly staggering. God didn't just generally separate the people. He differentiated them down to their literal livestock. The source points out that God ensured not even a dog belonging to an Israelite would suffer the plagues that hit Egypt. This is a God who actively, meticulously separates the clean from the unclean. He demands real holiness from his followers, actively pulling them away from the corruptions of the world. And importantly, referencing 1 Peter 4:17, the text notes that this living God actually judges his own house first. He actively disciplines his own church to ensure they maintain the strict purity that he requires. Which brings us right to our final slide, and really the ultimate takeaway from this source material. We've seen exactly how God organizes, how he unites, provides, and judges. He is absolutely not a sleeping idol. He is wide awake, active, and intimately present. So the question we are left to wrestle with is this. If the living God is watching absolutely everything you do right now, how does that change the way you live today? It's a really powerful, sobering reminder that the faith described here isn't just some passive weekly tradition. It is a moment-by-moment relationship with a working, living God. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the source material. I really hope this structured look helped you grasp the profound reality of this topic. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.